The biggest type 1 error you can make is choosing the wrong piece of land for your homestead. If you don't get this part right, you might get yourself and your family stuck on a piece of property that you don't like. I know because it happened to me. Over 20 years ago, when I was just a naive young surfer kid with money in my pocket burning a hole, I bought the cheapest land that I could find because that's all that I could afford. Once locked into that land, I spent the next 20 years clearing vegetation, building a house, and creating my garden here. But as the years went on, I began to realize the mistake that I made. In year 1, 20 miles to town or to go hit up the surf didn't seem so bad. But by year 20, that drive's beginning to be a little bit of a drag, and the gas ain't getting any cheaper. 20 years ago, I didn't have any neighbors, and now they're all over the place here. And one of the reasons I chose this property 20 years ago was because I was located near 2 world-class surf spots. But unfortunately, 6 years ago, one of them got covered by lava. And 20 years ago, I didn't have a family. And now I do. And so much changes when you have a family. Things you never think about when you're just a single kid looking for some waves. If only I had the foresight to think ahead 20 years to see if this piece of land I was thinking of getting would stand the test of time. Because let me tell you, starting over sucks. It'll take me at least another 10 years to get the place that I just moved to look like my old place here. And it only takes a couple hours a month to manage this place. But I'm looking at a couple hours a day to manage my new place. But you're not going to be like me, are you? You're already smarter than me because you're watching this video and videos like these to inform your decision before you make a major life purchase. So today I'm going to share with you what I've learned since I was that 23-year-old kid so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. Throughout all my years as a homesteader and my many years developing homesteads for other people, I found this one tool that made this process a whole lot easier. And it was developed decades ago by an Australian farmer named P.A. Yeomans. It's called the scale of permanence, and it includes climate, landform, water, social and economic access, access and circulation, vegetation and wildlife, microclimate, infrastructure, zones of use, soil, aesthetics, and an exit plan. Now this list has been modified a little bit since P.A. Yeomans came up with it, but it pretty much goes from things that are hardest to change to things that are easiest. And to make sure you don't forget everything that I go over in this video today, I made a handy cheat sheet that you can bring with you next time you go look at a property. I'll make sure to leave a link for it down in the description below for you to download. But let's dive deeper now into those different elements of the scale of permanence. Can the entire human race have an effect on climate? Probably. Can you change the climate? Most likely not. When you go and choose the right piece of land, does it have the right climate? Are there any frost days? And how much rainfall does it get? And how many days between each rain event? How about severe weather events? Are those areas you're thinking about moving to going to be able to handle such extreme weather events in the future? You cannot change any of those factors, so you better make sure that your homestead is located exactly where you want it to be. Next, you should pay attention to landform. Landform includes slope, aspect, geology, and elevation. Is the land flat or does it slope? How extreme are those slopes? And what direction do they face? It's pretty hard to change the direction of a piece of land from north facing to south facing. So it would be a good idea to get a piece of property that faces the right direction from the start. If you're in the northern hemisphere, southern facing slopes are the best. Whereas in the southern hemisphere, it's going to be the northern facing slopes. Another factor to consider would be the area's geologic features. Is it located on a rich oil deposit that you have no mineral rights to? Or is the rock made of something like serpentine or something where the plants really won't grow that well? Another feature to keep an eye out for is water, because not much will happen on a property without it. The geology of the land will determine whether or not a well can be dug. If you can't dig a well, and you don't get enough rain in a certain area, that cheap piece of property might just end up being a money pit. I was looking at this property on the coast of California during the last downturn. It was a 3-bedroom house for $50,000. In my mind, it was a steal. But when I went to investigate that property, I found out that there was no water. The current owner was borrowing water from his neighbor. And when I called the well drilling companies, they told me that they tried and they were never able to find water on that property. Would you really want to depend on your neighbors for your water supply? I sure as hell didn't, so I didn't go ahead with that deal. Cheap land is not always what it's cracked up to be. All right, now this is something that I looked over when I was younger and buying my first property here. And this was something that was added to the Yeoman Scale of Permanence by Dave Jackie and Eric Tonsmeyer in their Edible Forest Gardening books. And this is the economic and social factors that come into play with your property. Is the property located near jobs? Or do you have to drive really far to access that? Are there neighbors who could potentially become friends? Are there kids for your kids to play with? Are there areas for you to ride your bike if that's what you like doing? All of these things are important factors to consider, because if you don't, you may just well be driving a whole lot. So I'm going to let you in on a little tip. The perfect location for a homestead is right on the outskirts of a city center. The urban fringe, if you will, where you're not so far out in the rural areas and you're not so far into the urban city, but you're right there on the edge where properties are larger, rules are a little bit looser, and you're allowed to have agricultural activities going on. And you can still access the city by bicycle. Other things to consider here with the social and economic factors are: what are your neighbors like? Do you require an easement to access your land? And so on. Talking about access, it's at this point that we begin to talk about access onto your property. Are there already existing roads, or do you need to make new roads to access certain areas? How does the flow work on the property? Where do you feel most energies would be going? Are there pathways or roads already in place to take advantage of these energy flows? Or do you have to create them? If this was a new property that you were looking at, you would want to consider the water systems first, and then how the access will fit into all of that. What sort of wildlife and vegetation do you have on the property? Because this could be the difference between a cheap piece of land and a piece of land that's going to get really expensive really quick. A lot of times when you find these cheap, underpriced lots, there are these huge invasive trees that require tens of thousands of dollars to remove. And sometimes a more pricey lot that doesn't have that on it will actually be cheaper. Likewise, the wildlife in your area will determine your success as a gardener and whether or not you have to put up other expensive things such as fencing. Around here, pigs could decimate a garden almost overnight. And in other areas, it's going to be deer, it's going to be gophers, there's going to be all sorts of wildlife that want a piece of what you're growing. So it's good to have an idea of what you're looking at so that you know how to design your homestead to be able to mitigate those things. Continuing on, every piece of property has unique microclimates. Some properties have areas that are prone to frost. Others have spots that are hot, sunny, and dry. It might be really windy in one spot and completely still in another. Knowing what you have will determine what your land is capable of and what sort of strategies you need to do in order to perhaps enhance those microclimates. I remember when I first started here on my property, after it got cleared, it was just one hot, flat lot. And the sun would just beat down and there would be no shade. But after 10 years here, I have all these beautiful shady spots. I have some sunny spots. I have windy spots, and I have still spots. I've been able to create these microclimates over time, meaning that even though you have certain microclimates right now on the property you may be looking at, you can adjust those microclimates to feature more of something that you might want. But be mindful of this, it still takes time and money. So if you have to do a lot of work trying to change your microclimates, be sure to take that into consideration when you're looking at a piece of property. And most homesteads have something on it besides just plants, like buildings, sheds, workshops, roads, fencing, or utility lines. You might be looking at raw land and have to develop many of these features, or it may already have some of these things in place, and you just have to determine what state it's in and whether or not they need repairs or anything. And if you do have raw land and you're going to be adding some buildings or other infrastructure, make sure that you follow all of the other steps preceding this step before you begin building. All right, in permaculture, there's a concept known essentially as zones, or zones of use. It's pretty much how you move around and flow on your property on a given day, week, or year. And a piece of land may dictate what your zones may be. Sometimes there's natural features that mean that you can't go in a certain direction, like a giant boulder or a steep drop-off that requires you to go in one way rather than the other. When I look at a new piece of property, I like to imagine how my flow would be so that I can see if the property will actually work with what I'm imagining. Down here on the bottom of the Yeoman scale of permanence is soil. Now you think this might be higher on the list, but it's actually one of the easiest things that we can manipulate. My property here was just rock 20 years ago, and now I have a bunch of soil. I've been building up the soil throughout the years. And when you think about it, this gives us an edge as permaculturists. When we look at a property and determine whether or not it's a right fit, we can find ones that have poorer soil because we know how to repair it. And that means we might be able to find a cheaper piece of land. Now, I'm not saying that building soil is easy, but a healthy compost, a rotational grazing program, good soil management plan can create good, healthy soil before you know it. Added on to the scale of permanence by Tonesmeyer and Jackie is aesthetics of a property, which is one of the things most people tend to put on the top of their list when they're looking at a property to buy. But in fact, it's one of the easiest things that we can manipulate and change. And you can save big money by going for a property that doesn't rank high on the aesthetic scale, but it has potential to in the future. Sometimes all you got to do is just clear some trees and you have yourself an ocean view or a beautiful view of the valley or something. Simple things that you can do to change the aesthetics and also raise the value of your property without having to pay for it up front. Now, hopefully you found the homestead of your dreams for you and your family that you could pass down to future generations because you followed the scale of permanence and you were able to use that to determine whether or not the property was a right fit. But if you want to make God laugh, go ahead and tell him your plans. And I added this one on the list because I wish I made up an exit strategy all those years ago. All right, now you have the tools to choose the right homestead for you. Remember, I created a handy cheat sheet that you can bring with you when you go visit your next homestead, so be sure to check the link down in the description below because that cheat sheet might just end up saving you thousands of dollars. And it's completely free. And if you're looking for ways to get onto land and you don't have much money, check out this video right here. Who knows, it might help you get onto free land just by watching. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Ahui ho.